Okay, thank you. We are from the government and strongly agree with that this motion say that we have to believe that the failing cities should be governed by private company rather than relying on central government solution. Firstly, we need to understand what is private company itself means. Private company is the company that are non-government. So it means that this private company are managed by the person who isn't involved in our government stuff. So it means that the private company has their own power that different from the government powers. So why we believe that our government side believe that this failing cities should be governed by private company because these failing cities cannot unable to provide even basic welfare for their own society. So if we just wait for the resolution of the central government, that means that first the society it will be too much worse for the society and the government. First for the society first, because they will if we wait for the central government solution, they will face more years with struggling in their cities, which is the cities fail to provide them their basic welfare. So it means that if the society just waiting for the central government solution, they will face more years with struggling with their condition in the status quo today. Because the status quo cannot provide even the basic welfare for their society. Secondly, there will be more danger and more death rate in the society in these failing cities because the lack of the fulfillment of the basic welfare from the society, from the government in this failing city. So it means that if they are just waiting for more years, they will be face more danger and it will cause more death rate in this failing city itself. Thirdly, the more society won't trust their own government, which is in this case is failing cities, because they think that their government cannot provide them even from the basic welfare. So it means that at the end they will lose their trust with their cities, their government. So they will go out from the cities, and it means that later on the cities will no longer exist because the society have lost their trust and they go out from the cities. So it means that if we just waiting for more years, it means that the society will lose trust and go out from the city. So it means that the city will no longer exist because there's no society that want to still stay in these failing cities. Thirdly, why we prefer to choose these failing cities to be government or private company? Because private company can give the faster solution. Because the sooner the city's problem solved by the private company, the sooner the cities will be healed by this private company. Rather than they're waiting for the resolution for the central government that will take more time. It means that this private company that can help these failing cities more, so these failing cities can be held as fast as possible. It's positive for the society and positive for the government from this failing city itself. And next, relying on the central government resolution was not the best choice. Why? Because the central government cannot guarantee that they can after this failing city is waiting for the resolution from the central government. The central government cannot guarantee that they can solve the problem from this failing cities. Because why? Because this central government has already have many problems that different from this failing city. So it means that this government cannot guarantee that they can solve the problem from these failing cities, and because the central government has already get so many problems that there is no guarantee that they can manage the problem from these failing cities itself. And also, we are not talking that in case of we choose to govern these failing cities in the private company, we are not talking just because the private company can govern the failing cities so they can manage everything about the cities. No, we are not talking about it. But because govern some cities to private company or also have regulation and also have mechanism. So it doesn't mean that we govern them to private company. It doesn't mean that we give all the responsibility or the rights from this private company to manage these failing cities. Not like that. But there are also regulation, there are also mechanism. We can make agreement for between these failing cities and between this private company that can give value for each side, in the failing cities and also in the private company. For example, the private company can heal this failing city as much as possible. For example, giving money, or for example, providing them a basic welfare for the society itself. For example, build these failing cities more for facilities. For example, to help these failing cities become be healed sooner than they expected to. And in this private company side also, they can take a value from this failing city. For example, even after they help these failing cities, they can, for example, throw infestation to these failing cities after they become better. So each side of this private company of this failing cities also have of the value profit from each side of this company. So it means that if you are governing this failing city to the private company, it doesn't mean that we just throwing this failing company, but we try to make each side of this status quo is taking their own profit itself. So that's why our study group has really proud to propose this.
The problem is not about money, because in the current status quo, Detroit have money, have funding from the central government. The problem is about political will and how accountability can be kept in check, and to make sure that the policies that they make can be to make policies that is providing basic welfare, in which we think, ladies and gentlemen, a world in which accountability happens and we can pressure government is a much more safer and easier way for us to pressure them, rather than companies in which have more power and have more calculus that are going to be much malicious towards these kinds of people that needs these kinds of protection of welfare, ladies and gentlemen. So opening opposition wants is clear in the current status quo, gentlemen. We want to use our ability to fix failing cities using central government resolution. If status quo is not that progressive, we are going to make sure that the central government resolution are going to be more targeted towards these kinds of failing cities, and to make sure that it is not only giving them only funding, but to make sure that constantly evaluation in these kind of cities about how their management is and how the political turbulence that happens in the current status quo and how we fix that, ladies and gentlemen. One direct responses towards team opening government. So their main argument is that in the current status quo, we can make agreements, we can get money from these kinds of institutions. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, one, I think, ladies and gentlemen, in the current status quo, why do you think there is a very big incentive for companies to just waste all of their money for cities to begin with, ladies and gentlemen? I think in the current status quo, if there is a company or that want to govern these cities, so most likely they want to not waste all of their money. They try to conserve their money and use their money in a much more efficient budget, ladies and gentlemen. This is harmful because if they want to be efficient, they must to make sure their policies and how they govern them to be very minimalist. This is very harmful because they try to trade off other things, such as if they try to provide basic welfare, they try to they try to maybe lower the safety in work field. They try to lower the safety net in other kinds of institutions, of other kinds of companies, or other kinds of field that needs these kinds of protection and needs this kind of funding, ladies and gentlemen. In a comparative, I think government resolution is much more safer. Why? Because in a condition where you are having a tight budget, they never think about trade-off other kinds of institutions that might be harmful, because they see that all people should be protected and we cannot trade off one or the other, ladies and gentlemen. So I think in the current status quo, our side going to be better. I'm going to argue one big argument why. First, what makes failing cities fail, why the central government solution are important to fix this, and why in a comparative, private companies are going to make it worse to fix these kinds of failing cities, ladies and gentlemen. So I think failing cities not only happen just because they lack money, ladies and gentlemen. In the current status quo, they lack management and they lack sustainability to make better policies and make better political stability in the current status quo. So what we need is simple, sustainability. Why better in our side? A, because I think, ladies and gentlemen, central government resolution are much more comprehensive and their discussion is much more holistic. In the current status quo, let's see how central government resolution make their policies. They consider all of the external factors that may happen in current status quo. Right now, in the throw it, ladies and gentlemen, why there is a very big political incentive for them to not go to not go make basic welfare, because they consider that in the current status quo, that is not our necessity, ladies and gentlemen. So I think if in the current status quo that is being controlled by these kinds of companies, they are going to amplify that and going to make policies that are going to prioritize the rich, because they know that in the current status quo, the political trajectory is going towards that, ladies and gentlemen. But in comparative, in our side, central government resolution are going to pressure them and make the political nuance that in the current status quo, that is not something good, because your ability to not provide basic welfare are also harming other individuals and also harming the constituency of individuals in the current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. So in a comparative, if they are talking about discussion, I think their side are going to be far worsened. Why? Because their discussion are going to be limited towards the board of directors and the companies in those kinds of areas. They do not consider the external factors, such as maybe urbanization, that try to make these kinds of people go out from the city rather than fix it, ladies and gentlemen. I think these kinds of discussion are not holistic. Thus, the first comparative, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be very simple. Our discussion are going to be much holistic, that is going to consider all of the factors that is important in the current status quo, rather than in their side, their discussion is only about these kinds of internal companies, ladies and gentlemen. But even if on their side, they can say that companies might want to consider other factors, ladies and gentlemen, this may happen, but it will be less likely in a goal that try to make a collective benefit towards all individuals, because they want to also make sure that the calculus, there is the consideration of my own company, not the whole state or the whole cities as a whole, ladies and gentlemen. But second argument, why better in our side for failing cities? Because notice that in the current status quo, there is an inherent profit-oriented interest for these kinds of companies from making calculations, ladies and gentlemen. So just let's picturize what will happen if they govern the cities when happen in the current status quo, gentlemen. Their calculation is, if I try to help people, it will be in a condition that I will not harm myself, ladies and gentlemen. This is harmful because notice, providing basic welfare is not cheap and easy, ladies and gentlemen. In the current status quo, if you want to provide free education, free healthcare, you need a tons of budget, ladies and gentlemen. So in the current status quo, the moment when they are not having that budget, they're going to trade off other people and trade off other safety measures that is important for other individuals in these kinds of things, ladies and gentlemen. So I think most likely that profit-oriented interests on their side are going to harm the individuals in the ground. But even if, ladies and gentlemen, that in both sides, the deadlock is that even if profit-oriented can be translated into better policies, I think the most important thing to consider in the debate is accountability, ladies and gentlemen. In the current status quo, notice that when things go back by the central government resolution, our decision to change that is very simple. It's through voting, it's through demonstration, and say that the government is failing and that the government is actually the one at fault in the current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Notice that in their side, if companies fail, companies have the capital budget and have the political capital to say that in the current status quo, this is not our fault. There is so many external factors that is happening, especially in the current status quo. Companies can just bribe their ways through courts and bribe their ways always through social media narratives and say that in the current status quo, this is not my fault, ladies and gentlemen. So at least in our side, our attempt in trying to say that there is something wrong and there shall be a political pressure happens in our side, ladies and gentlemen. But in their best case scenario, where things go wrong and things go worst case scenario, gentlemen, the best thing to explain is which side can get better bailout system, ladies and gentlemen. In the current status quo, when central government resolution does not work and that budget are being minimalized, in the current status quo, government can bail them out and give them more funding from their central government. In their side, bailing out are not going to happen because government are giving the governance towards the companies at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. If they do it, it will be a political suicide at the end of the day. In conclusion, our side shows to you, government are more accountability and more ability to holistically rationalize the decision and rationalize the context for team opening opposition. Thank you.
Well, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the opening government will be so much disagree and so much make a strongly disagree from the opening opposition. We say that the statement or seems like the fail it absolutely comes from the cities itself. But in status quo there are plenty amount of failed city. But let's see from the background. The welfare or basic welfare or parameter do the society need to government didn't provide that. So how the society will be survive if the government that didn't serve the basic welfare such as food and etc. And firstly, what causing city become failed? First, the fail from the government's management to treat the city properly. And second, the distance. It means that the coordination, the communication, it will be so much. There will be such a wall between this from the city, from the certain city to the from the central government. If there will be like a wall, it will be hardly to serve the communication and or coordination. It will be simplified there to ignoring the city itself and not to pay attention to what the potential to the city itself. So every single region, every single city have different potential each other. If it is such impossible to government, even if they are in a small city, in the big country is even more harm. If, like I said before, that every single city have a different potential to the city, unable to try to recognizing and learn about the city, all of them. So it's what that it will be the central government are unable to recognizing properly toward the every single city do they have, and they unable organizing the city because they're not so recognizing how the cities are such a potential student, farming potential, and welfare needs. And the distribution of basic welfare such as food, social security are slow. It will be causing plenty amount of the certain city are choose to more become independent than will be such more independent because the contributions of the distribution from the welfare itself such as food, social security are slow and is not suitable or not balanced with what they need toward their government itself. And let's see that if the private company handles the city, it will simplify the communication and easier to make a policy toward the city. Firstly, considering on more specific areas, which make the city or easier to manage the city because there will be no gaps between the certain city itself. Yes, we know that one of the causing central government are more ignoring the certain city. It because there will be gaps. It's more potentially because the large of the city itself. Yes, it will be more gaps to them. And second, the city will brave to be more independent, not only because depend on the short-time decisions. It will be more considering which potentially better if they are managed by the company's agents. Yes, it's not only its short-time decision. It will be considering from long-term decision by the certain region itself to be more brave, to be more independent than just depend from what the government's distributions. And next, for instance, in a Detroit city, for instance, it's not always you're not always able to blame the city from the become a failed city. It's not always their failure or mistake to manage themselves, because also the less of contribution from the government, it will be more causing they will be become a failed city. And such in other countries, such as in Catalonia, where just become even more, even they are try to become independent, but they are still not allowing from the United Nations. But in Catalonia, they are choosing to be independent than Spain. Because what? Because human resources waiting government contribution waiting it's more potentially to waiting their the central government's help and supply to their people. It will be unnecessary to do for them, because what? Because there are plenty of potential do they have, such as human resources and so on, and welfare, and also there are sports, such as that, which is more potentially them to big change, to more shiny, and to big that they are in the city itself become able to become more rising up than if they just depend and waiting from the central government itself. That was so much as a big parameter. If the central government didn't provide such as basic needs, such as welfare and so on, it will bring more harm. If they're still waiting, they will be more simplify them to if they act right now with join with the company. So we are proudly propose the motion. Thank you.
We told you that status quo is progressive. They get help. If it is about the management of the money and etc., Fimon told you our mechanism. But if it's the problem of trust, I'll explain to you why, even in the very worst case scenario, where government is the only benevolent and angelic actor that you can trust and rely upon. And I'll explain to you in the long term, in the end of the day, government can never even control the region again if they give the dependency towards the company in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So my extension will be talking about how society cannot accept and will reject the company in the end of the day, and second of all, on how that the government can no longer control their region, right? So first of all, let's see the status quo. How status quo picturization, right? So the exclusive characterization of the members of government is they are people who come from different background, part of regions, and etc., etc. They represent certain community, their ideas, their interests, and also their identity. They are people who promises hope and life-changing narrative to society society, which is inclusive and generally become the problem society wants to change. And it consists of ideas defending specific community issue, and it consists of ideas defending inequalities problem, not always just about pragmatic material benefit and capital help. Notice that the basic welfare solution is not always just come from money, but in the sense of society's emotion of how it can be catered, how the issue can be heard, and how their voices can be voiced out, ladies and gentlemen. So what's the problem in status quo if they want to run the proposal? Private companies do not provide that kind of narrative and characterization that government had. Notice the inherent characterization of companies are profit oriented. They always having interest to gain much benefit, right? Their concern isn't consisting of what general society want. They don't have inherent interest upon social issue. Notice that the motion cannot work. Notice that the motion is not only working in failing cities of Detroit, but general characterization of the cities which is failing. So we think that the characterization of company and government will always can work. So first of all, the company itself does not have the intention to do so, right? Because they're the one who have this. They are the one who make the social disparity. They have discrimination upon race, for example. They also don't have the intention upon the issue of identity and privileged society and underprivileged ones. They are also the one who have the child labor and violation to human rights and ignore the women protection issue. They exploit vulnerable society in status quo, right? Consider that the company is the inherent contributor of those problems. So in the how society will see that, right? The social construction that society had is how that the company made social construction of women are not good to work. Men are preferable. Last high top officials who are men. Second, they also construct because they are profit oriented. They will not care the issue of inequalities and rights violation as long as they can be profit, and they will not care. Third, they also construct the construction of they are people who are privileged and can get easy initial capital to build business, ladies and gentlemen. What does it imply, right? First of all, it implies how government exists to neutralize the inherent evil intention of company. How is that so? The idea of them representing people, they are chosen from majority voices. Society prefer them because they have vision and mission. Society prefer them, trust them because their policy they offer. It is exclusive for government to be the only benevolent actor for society because society and government is coexist. They exist because society needs them and to rule them out and to hear their voices. In current status quo, the only intuitive actor that will protect the society is government. That's why they make, for example, tax redistribution and equal job fill vacancy. They give education. They consider the right of each person because they represent all society. In comparative to their side of the house, the private companies will only care to certain people who are privileged and they see lucrative, right? Second implication is that within this characterization of how for so long the inherent construction is company is rich and they are privileged, this is something that society does not like. That's why political narrative that we have in status quo is most likely the unprivileged individuals that achieve success hardly. Minority background like Obama who brought equality narrative. That is why these kinds of narrative are the one that society always like and not the narrative that the company itself offer. So the narrative company brings, which they are privileged, focus on profit, exploit the workers, are not preferable for society. Even when they promise money, but society's issue is not just about money. So the further implication of this is the help will not be sustainable, right? Because if you already govern by people who you don't like and will only in the end of the day making this disparity between the one who are rich and the one who are poor is higher, they will only just focus on money and how the society can be able to have the purchasing power and not the social issue that the society has. And they will not solving issue of inequalities and discriminative issue towards society. Their best case is how the management of company will be good, right? We say, ladies and gentlemen, it will not happen, right? Because they will make the workers' salary is not that high, and they will make it contingent upon how they want to have the benefit itself because they are profit oriented. So they will not care with the workers who are blue collar, for example, who are not profitable for them. But even if it is so, in the long run, we will be dependent towards the company itself because in the end of the day, the company will always simplify the problem that society has, that they want money. But it overshadowed the chance and capability of government to see other issues which is potential for this in our society, right? Like how government is the only actor who will see the collective problem and will propose the collective benefit and collective solution for all people, and company does not have that kind of intention, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, it will also be harmful because they will always prioritize people who are benefiting them and not people who are only giving them the burden, ladies and gentlemen. In the end of the day, if the government always see that the solution is about money, they will be depending on the company, and they will have no chance and capability to see other issues which they are actually responsible upon the society itself, because they to begin with exist and chosen by the majority and to solve the problem of society itself, which is why we prove to you that we prove to you that the failure of the government is not only just because of money but also because of other issues that they cannot be solved. We say to you that the issue of a region with a with a lot of number of people cannot only be solved by just a certain night. We believe that it's 15 years, but with 15 years, the revolution and resolution of the government system cannot also be only changed by that way, and company can never change that inside of status quo. Therefore, we oppose.
We do believe that in order to solve the problem of failing cities, we need to first create a much more inclusive welfare system. Second of all, we need to have a much more accountable government, and third of all, we need to be able to actually create a sustainable economic development in those failing cities. We believe that the government is not the appropriate actor in order to do this. But before I go delve deeper into my arguments, let me first give some rebuttals to the opening opposition side of the house. There are three arguments that are basically brought by the opposition. First, they say that governments are more accountable, and therefore they are the more appropriate actors in order to actually do development because they have benevolent intentions towards the society. First of all, they portray government as some sort of like monolithic entity where every single one of every single part of government is basically have this intention that is to improve the welfare of society. Right? This is a very naive picturization of society, because government is consisted of a lot of special interests, because governments are very politicized. They are considered divided among political lines, among political parties, and each of these political parties have their own interests. In fact, it is probably that in some cases that these governments are actually intentionally tried to maintain the state of failing cities because it's going to actually to benefit some certain parts of their constituency, right? So, second of all, the arguments are basically because government are willing to bail out failing projects. We consider this a very dangerous proposal. Why? Because the cities are failing in the first place. I would like to characterize first why this is failing in the first place. A lot of these cities like Detroit are basically mono-industry cities, right? These are industries that have been subsidized for years and for decades by governments, while actually not providing any type of innovations whatsoever, are not capable of providing any profit whatsoever, and basically they are becoming a financial black hole for governments, and in the long term, they are actually only contributing to as a financial black hole for these governments, expanding government debt without actually providing any benefits whatsoever to this government. We believe that the private companies are therefore much more appropriate to solve this problem. Furthermore, they believe that government can also provide more welfare more holistically. We completely deny this, because first of all, because I've said before, governments are politicized. They are likely to specifically target their welfare to certain segments of society that is likely to vote for them. This is exactly why cities in the Midwest are basically suffering quite a lot basically suffering in this type of disaster for a long time, because precisely because governments choose not to actually reward certain segments because they are going to reward their political opponents in the first place. Now, let me go into my arguments after I give my comprehensive rebuttal. First of all, no, thank you. First of all, that we believe that the speed and the funding of government activities is simply too inefficient to actually solve this kind of problem. Why? Because the problem of efficiency is one of the most central problems in order to solve the problem of sovereignty. Municipal governments are basically unable to think outside the framework of growth because they are basically restricted to a myriad type of regulations and lots of monopoly charters, basically from oftentimes from state-owned companies or certain special interests that are beholden to these governments. Right? Even if it's in a case where governments basically are able to do this, they are going to be able to have very heavy-handed methods. They are going to employ police power, to military power, to simply bulldoze certain areas in order to pave way for gentrification. Right? There is simply no case where government will actually do any form of catering to this type of settlement, because simply government has something called monopoly of violence. Right? Because therefore government are less accountable to the public because they can simply employ violence in order to simply bulldoze and maintain their political superiority or enforce their demands. There is unlike so when it comes to the private governments, because private governments do not have monopoly of violence because they are registered as legal entities, and therefore civil society can actually sue them in courts. First of all, we do not say that we simply should abolish government. We simply wanted to say that government become like some sort of a night watchman state. Basically, it's simply going to maintain courts and security and maybe to provide fairness, but administration is simply going to be done by private companies, because private companies are the ones who are actually invested in these areas, are actually the ones who knows like the business structure of these areas, who knows what type of thing that should be invested on, what type of thing that is going to bring benefits, what type of sectors that are going to enliven and create jobs and actually prosperity in this area because of their private. No, thank you. Now, basically also we believe, because they are legal entities, on principle that these private companies are basically are going to be restricted to checks and balances to civil society, because civil society can simply sue them in court. In the case of if it's controlled by the government, however, government can, because of their dominance on political power, can simply push their way to courts and legislation without even considering a hearing a voice to this civil society in the first place. Take a look at India, for example, where the Narendra Modi government is basically simply bulldozing every sort of civil society demands, basically because they simply have the dominance in governance and politics, and therefore we believe when you do private companies, it's easier to sue them, it's easier to challenge them in court, it's easier to actually maintain civil society demands and in a sense actually fine-tune the policy of private companies in administering itself. Now, we believe that in order to manage these various cities, we need to create a collection of private companies, large private companies that are going to sit in a board of directors. We believe that this very type of government is going to provide a much better utility on a non-discriminatory basis. Why? Because their very nature is a profit-oriented motive, right? They are not going to segment their consumer base into racial, political, or socioeconomic lines. I would like to characterize to you that these cities are extremely very segmented on economic, racial lines, right? Therefore, because private companies want to expand their consumer base, they don't care if you are black, if you are democratic or republican, they just simply want your money, right? And therefore they are going to provide public service and utilities on a non-equal basis. They're going to create large joint stock companies in order to cater as much consumers as possible from civil society. And furthermore, we believe that it's going to actually create a much more sustainable form of growth and solve the problem of failing cities, because it actually encourages private entrepreneurs, right? We believe that the only way to sustain this the social of failing cities is to create a large number of entrepreneurship communities, right? Because it is the entrepreneurs that is actually able to provide economic growth, because it is through competition that innovation can actually solve this problem, right? The thing that causes failing cities because of this, because they lack economic diversification, right? Because they are mono-industry cities, they are unable to create economic diversification, and therefore they are unable to compete with other cities. Therefore, if we create much more diversified economy to private companies is going to solve. Also, private companies we believe are actually more democratic because they actually include every section of society and that participate and invest it, that actually has any interest in improving the livelihood of the city, unlike in the government where their main interests are basically political and to remain in power. We are very proud to propose this motion.
Well, panels, the concern of the government bench whole of their proposal is in the case of the sum to giving facilities and financial things to the or the welfare to the society. But we go analysis go further. Leading government is not simply giving people money. Leading government is not simply giving people money. Leading government is the moment that we have to fulfill the mission and the vision and the mission to take care the system run well. Go from this. I have three calculate points that will take contribution in our today's debate. First of all, the concentration of the private company to become a governmental things will be separate. The second of all, there is a possibility that could be happen economic monopoly, and the last is the responsible of the filer governmental itself. But before I go any further, what I can get from their side of the house. They simply want to rely on the private company to make sure that they could facilitate the citizens by giving financial things, by giving money and so on so far from the company. But it's worst proposal, ladies and gentlemen. All of them is limited. It's better if you run the governmental well to make sure that the citizens fulfill their own welfare, ladies and gentlemen. For example, of course, the company will think twice to facilitate the citizens and so far, because their agenda is not to make the agenda of the company to become basically their agenda is not to make sure the citizens will have their basic welfare. Their agenda is mostly to make sure that their company will run well, ladies and gentlemen. Go to my first extension. First of all, the concentration of the private company focus will be separate. Why I said this? Either on control governmental things or develop their own company. Of course, it will be separate. First of all, what is the purpose of the governmental? All of them already told. The agenda of the governmental thing are to make sure that they fulfill the citizens' basic necessities, basic welfare, and so on so far. In filer government already filed in our current statute already filed to fulfill these kinds of the things. And the existence of company itself, their agenda is to take benefits as much as possible to build their company become successful at the end of the day. It's very much contrary, ladies and gentlemen. So why the focus of company will separate? I said the governmental agenda so contrary with the company. If the company take over immediately, they cannot guarantee that they could manage the governmental thing as well as the origin government itself. Basically, it will make the cities, the failure of the cities getting worse, ladies and gentlemen. In comparative with the central government resolution, the central government resolution will focus on this problem. They will focus what kind of issue that happen in the society, in the cities, that make them failure in this case. They have to focus to solve the problem of that happen in the cities based on the conservative, not only based on their own financial, they could get the money on so and so far. But in governmental resolution, they could solve the solution by conservative. They do it in society not because have financial ability that growth that go with capability. They go with their capability in leading a cities to take is the problem, to cook directly an appropriate solution to focus on it. ladies and gentlemen, whether the failure government already failed to run the government, it could be carried as the representative of, or example at the next for the resolution of the government center to repair the system. It will be better in comparative by just giving government to private company that we know they have their own importance, that take care their own company. Of course, it will be separated, like as I said before. And because of this two different agenda, there is a possibility that happen big economic monopoly. Putting the company to the governmental system is the moment you give the chance to the private company to take benefits by becoming a government, ladies and gentlemen. To take to the government in the failure city, ladies and gentlemen, how it could be monopoly. In status quo, the economic things and so on so far is also take control by the government. The government make regulation about APBN, can I say APBD and so on so far, it take by the government things. So it will, there is a possibility of monopoly. There is a big company, it already take over the government, and they use this kind of power to focus and to make their company grow and so on so far, ladies and gentlemen, but without taking focus on the issue that happen in the cities, ladies and gentlemen. Big possibility they build a reason basically to the citizens to make the company become a center of economic. They make the regulation that their cities be as the big their company will take a part for the big economic system, ladies and gentlemen. So it's getting worse if we rely on the private company. And the third of all, the responsibility of failure government. The moment when they build a city and so on so far, they cannot fulfill the basic necessities and so on so far. They cannot just go from this case. They cannot just go take overhand to the private company. So why responsibility in this case? Because the one who know exactly the cause of the failure is the one that do the failure itself, ladies and gentlemen. We can take the signal. They can take the signal in this. They can take the signal of this case to do observation and they do their capability to focus to the resolution of the government central assessment. The solution for this problem, the solution is why not doing cooperation with the private company itself. The central government resolution still can control. The central government still can control the government thing run, the government system as well. They have resources to cooperating with the private company. What kind of cooperate? In this case, the government can build the agreement with the private company. They can take benefits from the economic thing. Their company will in their cities. They can take position in their cities by supporting the governmental agenda itself as well. So they could contribute to facilitate the basic necessities of the societies as well without take position in the government itself. So their agenda is their proposal is already invalidated by this solution. So because of that we have to think about the government things, the governmental system and so on so far. Very proud to oppose. Oh. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have to see this from the side of the citizens itself, ladies and gentlemen. You have to see this from the eyes of the people, ladies and gentlemen. We see that cities like the hustling and bustling city of Detroit, once the heart of America's muscle car industry, ladies and gentlemen, grind to a halt, ladies and gentlemen, because of the government in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. It's their policies, it's their rules that have grinded the cities to a grinding halt, ladies and gentlemen. Even if we say government has the duty to the people that they must be accountable, that they must be the ones to fix it, ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that the people has lost faith in the government in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, because it is the government that put these cities into this situation in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that they are now in this bleak state of overwhelming sadness, ladies and gentlemen. They are looking for saviors, ladies and gentlemen. They are looking for a way out because they have lost all the because of the government. They have lost all the trust in the government itself, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we say that it is possible and it will be better for these cities to actually have private companies to govern them, ladies and gentlemen, because as my previous speaker has mentioned before, the private companies actually have more interest into the cities, ladies and gentlemen. They know more about these cities, ladies and gentlemen, that will push it more, ladies and gentlemen. These cities have become political tools inside the government itself that grinds to a halt because different stances and different whims, ladies and gentlemen. We have seen that why the people will actually want to go side with us, ladies and gentlemen, why the people would actually want the private companies itself, ladies and gentlemen, because of the failure of the government in the first place, as I have mentioned, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, it is not to only bring back the government into this equation, ladies and gentlemen, would only cause harsh fightbacks from the communities that will not accept the government's ruling, ladies and gentlemen, because they have actually lost because the government has actually lost the trust of the people itself, ladies and gentlemen. To commit any other or new policies itself, it will meet harsh fightbacks from the people because the people has lost trust in the government. It's simply that, ladies and gentlemen. Giving this to the government, giving governance back to the government will only make things worse. Yes, we do believe that there are holistic views in place in central government, ladies and gentlemen. We do believe that, and because of these holistic views, that the process becomes long drawn out, ladies and gentlemen. It will only, as the opening bench have mentioned, it will only draw things out further, ladies and gentlemen. We do see that there are holistic views, and because of these holistic views, there are people in the central government that has views that are heavier in what they are heavier to what they think to these failing cities itself, causing that these holistic views are actually what's actually going to hinder the help in this in these failing cities itself, ladies and gentlemen. We also acknowledge, yes, that private companies has interest, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we do. We have the interest of gain, of profit, and through this we have interest of profit, ladies and gentlemen. We cater more to society because through society itself we generate a revenue, ladies and gentlemen, and to actually push this profit narrative, profit-oriented things forward, ladies and gentlemen. We actually help more to cater to society itself by providing basic needs that they would actually want. We understand that government also has interest itself. Not only do they have interest in their own fields, they have political interests, like maybe a very negative scenario, ladies and gentlemen, is that some people in the central government want these cities to stay this way because it is actually their voter base, ladies and gentlemen. They use this base of people, ladies and gentlemen, so that they can get more votes. They campaign for the welfare of these cities, but they don't actually do anything. That's the hardest negative side that you can see here, ladies and gentlemen. And it is actually possible that the government also has interests that rival their actual basic first principles, which is to cater to the people itself. While we see that governments, as my previous speaker has mentioned, can bully these cities, and therefore they cannot be actually accountable for what they have actually done, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, leading to the accountability side of the problem being brought by the government side of the opposition side of the house, being totally useless, because it is actually the private companies that can actually be held more accountable to what they will actually do and to what they will actually do, ladies and gentlemen. Then the government itself, which will actually push back harder to the people, ladies and gentlemen, to bully the people back, ladies and gentlemen, if they do not go with these policies itself. We do recognize that there are some policies that the government think is good, but the people do not say this is good because the people know more about the society itself, not the central government that has never actually even been to this place, ladies and gentlemen, that actually seen the actual impact of what they have done, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the private companies actually that giving this to the government will only actually postpone the problem, because if they subsidize in failing industries itself and will not commit harsh but necessary policies to these people, ladies and gentlemen, because this will only be political suicide for them, ladies and gentlemen. We need this harsh but necessary policies policies itself, ladies and gentlemen, because it is what revitalizes the industry itself, ladies and gentlemen. Only private companies can create economic enterprises that are actually sustainable itself, ladies and gentlemen, and only private companies can actually help the city revitalize themselves, can actually help the cities build the ground up, while as in the government, it will only, they will, through their holistic views, it will not only hinder the process of revitalization, they will have to think about the political suicide that they have done, ladies and gentlemen, and they will not actually help these industries, ladies and gentlemen, but they will only postpone postpone what we cannot actually avoid, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we see that it is only through this private entities itself, ladies and gentlemen, that we can actually help these towns, ladies and gentlemen, that it is the best interest for the people, because they have been along with these private companies in these cities, surviving through what the government has done, the evil things that the government has done to themselves, to the people themselves, and to these private companies that they are going through, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we see that a mutual trust has been placed through between the people and the private companies itself, leading to that a better trust into the policies in the private companies will cause better revitalization in the people itself, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we beg you to propose. Thank you.
Panels, do why opening government can win the debate if they give real clear explanation how actually the mechanism private company want to take out the government system. And then the kind of problem that happen in opening government, they think company and government can work together in this. It can work. They can't even know the differences about how company and government can work together in this case. You must know the differences between work together and their system had been taken away in this case. So they can't do anything to make policy. Only company will in charge for this. And what you need from opening government right now, they need to find the solution how private company not only take care of their company somehow when the concentration being spread out in this case, but they fail to claim it, so they are already out of the game. OO can win the debate if they keep emphasize to all of you how the sustainability of the government who can solve this problem can still exist under their side of the hot, but they not really engage to it. Sigi can win the debate if they explain the sustainability of the private companies can give welfare to the country and not calculate about it. Okay. Before going further, OG keep talking about how companies can help us in welfare way, and OO responds it with say it more important to have political actor who already been the part of us. What actually you can get from CO right now? We will explain to all of you how we can change our government system so the kind of problem that happen not only right now but also in the future will be solved up in this case. Simply because they are falling when running the government policy, it doesn't mean they should take out and throw their responsibility up. Notice that people who already choose them are citizen that at the first place, so they have responsibility to finish what actually they had done, even if they had failed to run the government at the very first place. Even if the worst case scenario that can happen under our set of the house is fail to solve this problem, we said it is okay for not change them, because this is our way to criticize them. So people who want to run in the next election will solve this problem. Notice that in election, every people who want to jump in election always provide their vision at the very first place. Like when there is a religion issue, all of parties will campaign with religion issue and try to solve it. If it is because there is something wrong in the government itself, of course all of the problem will go to all of the parties will go to election and try to make a mission about it to solve this kind of problem at the future. Okay, right now, OG come and said private company will help the falling cities and give them welfare in this case. Rahim had told you, the way company going to government system, their concern trend already being separate out in this case. Imagine that they should think about the problem that happen in their country and those kind of problem that happen in their company. So they will be playing safe in this case to not make their money wasting up. Notice that when government fall, it will be easy to change them. In this case, just going to the election and change another government. We can find them in election, for example. Imagine that when private company break up in their side of their house, it will be more hard to find company who want to in charge in this case right now. We have and then second speaker of Fojikam, we have a lot of potential, but government failed to see it. The only way we must do it is rely on the company itself. Like we don't have another way in this case. Okay, let's talking with the same parameter right now. Right now, notice that government failed to claim basic welfare because it is no simple game in this case. They think about what actually we can do, think how government think, but actually what we can do in this case and how government thinks about how we can solve this problem. Of course, it will be hard game. Imagine that company will take care of this when they calculate about everything in this case. Okay, CG said we need more developed welfare system, and government is no real actor in this case. Going to the responses, right? Even if we are not moved in another position right now, we said it is okay because the way government exists is to solve the problem. Not only go out if there is a financial back hole in this case. We said they have responsibility for it to solve this kind of a thing, and the thing all of parties who jump to the election will always try to solve the problem so they can be chosen in this case. And then they said we must see the side of citizen, and second, citizen will fight back because they lose their trust. Okay, we know right now society don't even think about the ideology. They think right now the things that they always think for. The things that they always think for is how they can get their basic needs, and they only think about economic things. But we said to keep that country still in our lane, we must keep the ideology and not throw it up simply because there is problem that happen in our country. Simply because there is problem, of course we need to solve it, not to change their system out in this case. And then he said if you really, he said he want to change the government because the people who are from company, he's really know the situation of the country itself. If you want to do that case, just ask the people from that company to go to election so they can run the government out. So because of that things, we totally brought to close the case.